I said, Ma, it's gonna be all right. No, Ma, the voice in my head tells me it's gonna be all right. And she cried all the way till the doctor said, Hartford!
If you grew up watching American television in the 1970s, you knew his laugh before you knew his name. The wild glasses, the ascot, the mischievous voice rising above the chaos of the match game panel. Charles Nelson Reilly made people happy for 40 years. But the man behind that laugh was carrying a secret most of his audience would never learn, not until he was almost 70 years old, and the country he had entertained was finally ready to hear it. This is the story of what he hid, why he hid it, and what it cost him to keep smiling. He was born in the South Bronx on January 13th, 1931, an only child. A Catholic Irish father and a Swedish Lutheran mother, two worlds pressed into one small apartment. From the time he could talk, Charles entertained himself the way lonely children do by making things up. He built his own puppet theaters out of whatever he could find. He performed for an audience of one, then for the cat, then for the wall. His mother would shoo him away when he got too loud. She had a phrase for it, and she used it his whole life. Save it for the stage. He took her at her word. For most of his career, Charles never described his family in public. But late in life, when he finally told the truth on a small stage in North Hollywood, he opened with a line nobody expected. He said the playwright Eugene O'Neill, the man who wrote America's saddest plays about damaged families, wouldn't have come near a family like his.
So there would be 7 of us. My father, me, my mother, my Aunt Lily and Uncle Benny, and my grandparents in a 2-room apartment with no heat or hot water.
There was an aunt who had been lobotomized, a father who would end up locked away, a mother who kept a baseball bat by the door, and a young boy in the middle of it, beginning to suspect he was different in a way that 1940s America did not yet have polite words for. This was the home Charles Nelson Reilly was born into. Almost nobody knew. His father was a man named Charles Joseph Reilly. He was a commercial artist. He drew movie posters for Paramount Pictures. And one day, another illustrator approached him with an idea, an animated film in full color, the first of its kind. They would start a company together. They would build something new. There was only one condition. The Reilly family would have to leave the Bronx and move to California. Charles's father came home and he asked his wife, and his wife said no. The other illustrator went to California alone. His name was Walt Disney. Charles Joseph Reilly began drinking. He never recovered. His son spent the rest of his life telling the story on stage, the day his father almost became Walt Disney, and the morning his mother said no. The drinking turned into something worse. Charles Joseph Reilly had a complete nervous breakdown. He was committed to an institution, and he never came home. His son was still a child. The Reillys' New York life ended overnight. Charles and his mother packed up and moved north to Hartford, Connecticut to live among her Swedish relatives. His mother's name was Sina. She was, by her son's own description, the most difficult woman he ever knew. She was harsh. She was prejudiced. She was, he said, the kind of woman who kept a baseball bat by the door, and she was not afraid to mention it. Charles was 13 years old. He was already strange in his family's eyes. He was about to live through something that would mark him for the rest of his life. It was a Thursday afternoon, July 6th, 1944. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus had pitched its great tent in Hartford. The matinee was sold out. Children sat on the bleachers with their mothers. Charles was 13 years old. A neighbor's mother had taken him and her own son to see the show. Somewhere in the crowd, Charles's older sister was sitting too. About 20 minutes into the performance, a small fire started on the southwest sidewall of the canvas tent. The tent had been waterproofed with a mixture of paraffin and gasoline. The fire moved faster than the audience could understand. Within minutes, the great top was a wall of flame. The exits clogged. People climbed over each other. Mothers handed their children to strangers. By the time it was over, 167 people were dead. Most of them were women and children. Charles survived because his older sister found him in the chaos and lowered him over the side of the bleachers away from the bottleneck below. He walked out into the daylight. He was alive. He was never the same. For the rest of his life, a life that would put him on 1,000 stages and over 1,000 television episodes. Charles Nelson Reilly could not sit in an audience. He could be on the stage. He could direct the show. He could not be a face in the crowd. He never told his Match Game audience this. He never had to. He grew up. He went to New York at 18. He studied acting under Uta Hagen. He scrubbed floors at the Waldorf Astoria to pay his rent. He understudied Dick Van Dyke on Broadway. He won a Tony Award in 1962 for How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. He was on his way. And he was gay. He had always known. In 1950s and 1960s, America, that knowledge was a kind of inheritance you did not get to refuse. Early in his career, he sat across from a network executive. He wanted to be on television. The executive looked at him, and he said the sentence that Charles would repeat for the rest of his life. They don't let queers on television. Charles did not argue. He left the office. Then he went out and got cast on more television than almost anyone else of his generation. Later, when he became famous, he would page through the TV guide and count the number of times his name appeared in a single week. That was his rebuttal. He never forgot the sentence. He just spent 40 years answering it. By 1973, he had a regular seat on a show called Match Game, upper right corner of the panel. Next to him in the upper middle sat a Canadian-born actress named Brett Somers. The show was built on innuendo questions with a blank that the panel had to fill, and the cheekier, the better. Charles became the master of the form. Every answer was a wink. Every laugh sounded like a private joke that the audience was somehow invited into. He pushed the boundaries of 1970s television almost every afternoon in a way that no one watching from their living room quite understood. He was talking about who he was. He just wasn't saying it. He hid in plain sight in front of millions of people for the rest of the decade. He appeared on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show more than 95 times. He sat on the Hollywood Squares board. He recorded over 1,000 Match Game episodes. And he never once said the word out loud on national television. Inside the show, his friends knew. Brett Somers was his closest companion on that panel. They argued, they laughed, they reached across the divider to slap each other's hand, and they understood each other in a way the audience could feel, but could not name. Off the set, Burt Reynolds, the most heterosexual male star in 1970s, America became one of his closest friends. They taught acting together. They built a theater school together in Florida. Reynolds adored him. Carol Burnett adored him. So did Lily Tomlin, Liza Minnelli, Bette Midler. All of them had passed through his acting classroom. Inside Hollywood, Charles Nelson. Reilly was respected, beloved, protected. Outside Hollywood, in the millions of homes that watched him every afternoon, he was just a funny man with glasses. The gap between those two pictures was the size of his entire private life. There was a cost. He admitted it himself. In a 2001 interview with The Advocate magazine, Charles said the line that should be carved on every game show panelist's chair. You can't do anything else once you do game shows. You have no career. He had won a Tony Award. He had directed Julie Harris in The Belle of Amherst, a one-woman play about Emily Dickinson, and it won a Tony of its own. He was nominated for another Tony in 1997 for directing The Gin Game. He was by any honest measure one of the most accomplished theater directors of his generation. But when the obituaries were eventually written, they led with Match Game. He knew they would. He told friends more than once that when he died, the headline would say, "Game show fixture passes away." Nothing about the theater. Nothing about the Tonys. Nothing about the Emmys. He was right about almost all of it. In 1980, on the set of a short-lived game show called Battle Stars, Charles met a set designer named Patrick Hughes. They began a relationship that would last until the end of Charles's life, 27 years. They lived together in Beverly Hills. They built a quiet domestic world that existed in complete parallel to the public. Charles Nelson Reilly, the laughing man on television. Patrick was almost never mentioned in interviews. He did not give them. The relationship was not hidden. Exactly. Friends knew the industry knew, but it was not announced, either because nothing in 1980s television invited announcement. For 27 years, Charles came home to the same person. He cooked. He worked in the garden. He directed plays in his head before he directed them on stage. The man America thought it knew on Match Game was in private one of the most loyal partners in show business. Almost nobody learned that until the obituary. The 1980s and 1990s were quieter years. He taught. He directed. He kept working on Broadway's Charlotte's Web, Break a Leg, The Gin Game. He coached actors who would go on to become some of the most famous performers of their generation. He held auditions in his living room. He stayed friends with Gene Rayburn, with Doris Roberts, with Hope Lang. The game show booking calls slowed down. The acting roles slowed down. The country that had once invited him into its afternoons every weekday was now changing channels. He didn't seem to mind. He had Patrick. He had his students. He had the Burt Reynolds Theater in Jupiter, Florida, where he taught for years. He had the house in Beverly Hills. And underneath all of it, he had the one story he had not yet told in full. The family. The fire. The line about queers on television. The 40 years of biting his tongue between punchlines. The story was waiting. He was getting ready. In the year 2000, Charles Nelson Reilly walked onto a small stage in Los Angeles alone, and he began to talk. The show was called Save It for the Stage. The Life of Reilly, the title borrowed from his mother's old phrase. He talked about the Bronx. He talked about his father's breakdown. He talked about the lobotomized aunt and the baseball bat mother. He talked about the Hartford Circus Fire. He talked about being 13 years old and being lowered over the bleachers by his sister, while strangers burned to death below them. He talked about the network executive and the sentence he could never forget. He talked about being gay in a country that had asked him for 40 years to be funny instead of honest, and how he had chosen, in the end, to be both. The show ran for years. It traveled across the country. He performed it more than 100 times. When the audiences gave him standing ovations, he stood inside the noise he had spent his whole life unable to sit inside because of a Thursday afternoon in 1944, and he let it wash over him. He was almost 70 years old. The truth was finally his. In October of 2004 at the El Portal Theater in North Hollywood, Charles performed Save It for the Stage one more time. The cameras were there. They wanted to record the final two performances and turn them into a film. He was already sick by then. He had developed serious respiratory problems on tour. He would never perform the show again after those two nights. The film, called simply The Life of Reilly, premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival in March of 2006. The reviews were rapturous. Almost no one outside the festival circuit saw it. He retired to the house in Beverly Hills with Patrick. He stopped giving interviews. The illness deepened. He was diagnosed with pneumonia. He went into the hospital. He came home. He went back. On the morning of May 25, 2007 in Los Angeles, Charles Nelson Reilly died. He was 76 years old. Patrick was his only immediate survivor, the man who had quietly been there for 27 years. The headlines, when they came, did exactly what he had predicted. They led with Match Game. The Tony Award came second. The directing came third. The 40-year relationship with Patrick was a single line At the bottom, survived by his partner Patrick Hughes, and for most of America, that was the first time they had ever heard the name. But something else happened too, and Charles did not live to see all of it. The film of his one-man show began to circulate. People found it. They told their friends. They wrote about it. Younger viewers who had never seen Match Game watched The Life of Reilly and understood for the first time that the laughing man with the glasses had been carrying a story heavier than any of them had imagined. The man who could not sit in an audience because of one Thursday in 1944. The boy whose father almost worked with Walt Disney. The actor who was told to his face that television had no room for people like him, and who answered for 40 years by simply refusing to leave the screen. The truth he had hidden was not a scandal. It was not a secret affair, or a crime, or a confession he was afraid to make. The truth he had hidden was just himself. And in the end, before the illness took him, he gave it to us in full. He saved it for the stage, the way his mother told him to, the way he had always known he would. Charles Nelson Reilly made millions of people laugh. He also lived one of the bravest quiet lives in American television history. He deserved both halves of his story. Now you know them.